Built by hand, in an age before architects, surveyors and structural engineers, today's historical icon dominates the Vale of the River Severn, exactly as it was intended to do over 900 years ago.
But that's not all, because this is where a master mason, working in the mid-1300s, that's just before the Black Death, rebuilt a major part of this building in a style so bold, so revolutionary, that it changed the face of English architecture. Welcome to Gloucester Cathedral.
When the cathedral, or St Peter's Abbey as it was then, was first built, the builders of the day didn't use plans.
But we will, and by walking our plans, we'll discover the scale and the daring of what they achieved.
We'll discover how the cathedral changed, who built what, when and where, and also how in medieval times this building was at the cutting edge of English architecture.
And we'll try and get into the minds of those visionary master masons who conceived, designed and led the construction of this inspiring building. Constructing a building of this size and complexity would be a major civil engineering task even today, let alone 900 years ago. So who were the builders and how did they learn their trade? And how did they know that what they'd built wouldn't fall down again? These are just some of the questions to which I'm seeking the answers. It's very impressive, isn't it?
But first, I need a crash course in basic cathedral design.
Here we have the plan, get it right way around.
We must be here.
No, we're here.
Are we?
Sorry,
we're
here.
here.
That's right.
Yes.
We're here. Yes.
Cathedral guide Robin Lund helps me get my bearings.
It's important to remember that essentially any great church was no different in plan from an ordinary medieval parish church with a nave for the people, choir and presbytery for the monks, the transepts for services in the chapels, but structurally to support the great central tower.
Yes. The north transept just there, isn't it?
The library here for writing and for study. The cloisters for exercise, for teaching.
For me, part of the fascination with old buildings like this cathedral is working out which bits were built when. To the untrained eye, it may all look of an age, old. But even though the basic outline has remained the same since the 1100s, the building has evolved over the years. An extension here, a repair there. So the cathedral we see today is a real mix of architectural styles.
You've got built windows from the 1320s, for example, which were very heavily restored by the Victorians.
To unpick them, you have to become a building detective.
You've got gargoyles, which are only 2 years old. You've got some very recent carving there, and the base of the wall is also Norman.
So you've got everything here from the 11th century to the 21st century.
Absolutely. And so here you have the tower.
All of which can sound quite confusing. But with the aid of our plans, we can make it much clearer. Take away the late 15th century extensions, and the cathedral looks like this. Rub out the mid-15th century tower, wind back time to before the 14th century rebuild of the choir, remove the south transept window, and this is what remains of the original Norman Abbey. From the clues in the surviving Norman parts of the cathedral, and also from what we know of other Norman abbeys, like Tewkesbury for example, in 1126 we think that the Abbey of St Peter's, Gloucester looked like this. I want to find out more about the design of the original abbey. Who better to ask than the cathedral's master mason, Pascal Michaelissin. So what's the most distinctive feature of Gloucester?
Undoubtedly, these massive Norman columns, the round columns.
They're so sturdy, aren't they? So
yes,
plain.
they are.
Pascal gives me a guided tour of the Norman nave.
Yeah. And can these columns give us clues about the people who actually built
Oh
this
yes,
place?
yeah, I can show it to you. We can see the bunker marks.
Ah, now is that one of the marks that you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the mason,
Right.
or this one here.
Yeah.
And as you can see, it's deeply engraved into the stone. So
Yeah.
these guys were not shy. They
No,
were
it's
quite
very,
bold.
bold, isn't
Yeah.
it? What is this mark, though?
The most pragmatic reason is to get paid
Yeah.
and to get recognized their work. And we must not forget that particularly in early medieval time, most people were illiterate.
Yeah.
And symbols, like bunker marks, had a huge significance.
So has every block got one of these marks on?
Practically, yes, you can. The same guys did that
Oh,
one.
that's the same
here.
one as that
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
And here, that's that one here.
Yeah.
Also, he did that stone.
So these two blokes probably
Yeah, yeah.
did most of the stones in this column.
And they were quite
But who were the masons who left these marks?
bold and
Where did they learn their
You can see
trade?
it. As you can see here above, you can also see that the working is quite crude. The Norman masters who came from Normandy had to teach the local Saxon people how to work stone. It took them a couple of decades really to learn the trade.
So if this is an example of the early crude work, can we actually see it getting better as the cathedral progresses?
Yes, absolutely.
Pascal shows me a wall built a generation later.
For example, we got a good example of a better technique. You can see that the guy started from that corner and radiated down, so it's worked vertically on the bench. Also, it's you can see that the cutting is neat, so he had a much better tool.
It's not got that sort of...
Evidence of a mason mastering his craft and leaving his mark to prove it.
Norman design is all based on rigid shapes, on squares, on triangles, and as Pascal showed us, on circles. When we look at their plans, we can see how this knowledge of geometry underpins all their designs. Now, this is a scale plan of the cathedral. 1 metre here is 10 in real life. So, if we measure the width of the nave, for example, it's about 3 metres, which is roughly 30 metres in the building itself. Now, let's measure the length of the nave from here at the west end down to where it joins the transept. Right, that's about 6 metres, or 60 metres in the building itself. In other words, twice the width of the nave. So the basic plan of this nave is simply 2 squares, end to end.
The same design principle holds true at the east end of the cathedral.
And the transept is 1.4 metres by 1.4 metres, so another square.
So to design this imposing abbey, the master mason planned 3 identical squares, 2 in the nave and 1 in the east end. He added 3 smaller squares in the middle, and he put a tower on top, also designed as a square. There you go, an abbey. A modern building stands on strong
So
foundations,
where are we heading for now then? Down to the crypt.
but a Norman abbey rests on its crypt.
Crash course in structural engineering.
The weight of the whole building bears down here.
Its own weight.
Get it wrong, and the structure comes crashing down.
Some evidence of how it looked like in the first place. And for example, here we got the original column and the original arch.
The person who first built this thought that it was okay, didn't he?
Yeah, but you can see here the original arch, which is completely distorted and was on the brink of collapsing.
Right.
So they had to add the secondary arch here, supporting the first one. And they had to do a structural diagonal rib vault to support the weight of the vault as well. They must have had some anxious moment, because before they were able to put it right, as you can see, particularly here,
That one is particularly worrying,
that one
isn't it?
was literally a moment away of collapsing. It's so weak.
But this implies that they don't sort of design it in the way that we design things today. They built it, and then after a while just noticed that it all started to sag and collapse.
Yes.
And then it was, right, what can we do to sort this problem out?
If we think about it, it's even more admirable because they didn't have knowledge, previous knowledge of structural engineering. They had to invent it. They had to go through that system of trial and error because there were no knowledge on which they could base their calculation or design.
Pascal tells me that there's evidence of this trial and error method in the outside walls of the cathedral too.
Now, the north side of the cathedral is effectively propped up by the cloisters. But this is the south side, and here the masons got it horribly wrong and it fell down. But when they rebuilt it, they made sure that it wasn't going to happen again because they propped it up with some nice sturdy buttresses.
They may have been learning how to do it as they went along, but the fact that so much of the abbey the Norman masons built and rebuilt still stands today testifies to their achievements. Step from the circular columns of the Norman nave into the south transept, and there's an even greater triumph.
Look at this magnificent window, at the decoration and the pointed arches. This was a revolution in design that changed the way that churches were built. The 13th, 14th and 15th centuries were times of great change in the country at large, but also physically in the structure of Gloucester Cathedral. Now, it may have been the abbots who initiated all the extensions and alterations, but the people who got their hands dirty designing and building them were the masons.
I want to gain a greater understanding of the working life of the medieval mason. So I'm heading to the cathedral's mason's yard, wondering how many of the techniques and tools that they used are still in use today.
They had a system of meritocracy because they had no school. So they had to generate knowledge and skills and training in another way. And that was based on bringing up the best of the abilities of each and also promoting the best.
So somebody could start off in a mason's yard just as a humble apprentice, and
Absolutely.
if they were good, they could rise to the
Absolutely.
position of what we would see as the architect or the engineer.
Probably they experimented on smaller scale building before applying what they had found on larger cathedrals.
So you start off with a parish church and you graduate to a cathedral.
Yeah, probably, yeah. I wanted to show you this illustration. And you can see that most of the masons, they are using one tool in particular.
Right.
And that is the double-edged axe. This tool was the primary tool for the working process of working stone.
So how do you use it?
With the index finger, cutting the stone vertically like that.
So why the finger like that? Is that to help sort of guide
to
it?
control the cutting angle. I'll show you how it works with that particular gesture.
It's very efficient, isn't it?
Yes. Someone who is experienced can produce a pretty flat surface in very little time. Have a go.
So what, you just hold your finger down?
Yeah, like that.
What, and then do I need to start at the top here?
Start gently at first. Yeah. Yeah, good. Julian is a natural. The further you go down with the axe, cutting on the side of the block, you will have a radiating movement.
Yes, it changes, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it changes
because there's a sort of circular movement
And,
to the way
that's the distinct radiation you will see on the surface of the block.
because you're not going to be able to cut sort of straight vertically. Actually, it's interesting. If you don't have your finger there, it doesn't work.
It is a very important gesture in terms of skills.
Hey, it's not quite as smooth as yours, is it? You make it look so easy.
Julian, you were really not bad.
Really?
Yeah, no, it's good.
That's very kind of you, Pascal.
Well, I cannot lie.
With their timeless double-edged axes, mallets and chisels, many masons have left their mark here. But the person who left the greatest mark has to be the master mason of the 1330s, the one who masterminded the complete rebuild of the choir at the east end of the cathedral, and in the process changed the direction of British architecture. The story starts with the barbaric murder of King Edward II in 1327. His body was brought to Gloucester, an event that's recorded in the Historia, a book written in the early 1400s by Abbot Frewster.
I've been looking forward to seeing this, David.
We're very proud of it.
Yeah, because this is the earliest history of Gloucester Cathedral that you've got, isn't it?
It is. Very few of our books survived the Reformation, and this is one of the very few medieval texts that we've got. History books in this period start with a great sort of sense of purpose. Sequitur. Here follows the history of the foundation of the monastery of St. Peter in Gloucester.
So is that Edward's name there?
That's right. Regem Edwardi, the King Edward, who's in the church, tumulatum, he's buried here.
Right.
And that's what, of course, is the focus of all this pilgrimage business. So much money comes in that there's enough money to build the aisle of St. Andrew.
Which is the south transept.
That's right, which is in fact our south transept.
Why was so much money flowing in? Because I thought Edward II wasn't a particularly successful or popular king.
It's to do partially with the fact that pilgrimage and relics are just so important. The notion that Edward shares a martyr's death is important, but people just want to get close to something that might be holy, real things that you can touch.
Having got close, they donated generously, and the abbots found that they had enough extra cash to completely modernise the choir where the royal tomb was housed. But first, the master mason did a trial run in the south transept. Out with the old. The Norman wall between the two side turrets was dismantled nearly down to ground level, and a huge beam was inserted to keep the turrets from falling in. Then, it was in with the new, a graceful arched perpendicular window, the latest revolutionary style. It's the earliest surviving example of perpendicular architecture anywhere in the country. Cathedral archaeologist Carolyn Hayway talks me through the architectural transformation.
So what about all this decoration then? Is this just makeover?
It is,
It's
yes.
just added on?
It's applied. It's stuck on like cladding for a multi-storey car park, I sometimes say.
Now, when did they do this?
It's in the 1330s when the tomb of Edward II had just been built. You may wonder why they started here, because of course the tomb is well over there in the choir. So they probably started it here as an experiment. They could have no idea how it was going to work out. And in fact, they did have problems. When they came to look at it in detail, the master mason came along, made his visit. He looked up at the tower and said, uh-oh, this is not going to work.
Really?
We need a buttress. So very reluctantly, no doubt with some medieval swear words, they had to put a buttress in.
So this is all part of this trial and error again, isn't it?
That's right, yes. And then they went on to transform the rest.
This was transformation on a truly epic scale. Audacious in its vision, revolutionary in terms of its architecture. They took off the roof. They demolished the eastern wall. They dismantled the end two Norman columns. They hacked out a larger arch in the side wall of the tower. And they sliced the remaining Norman columns in half, leaving the round edges on the outside and creating a flat surface on the inside. Into this space, cut into the very heart of the cathedral, they inserted a completely new building that soared 88 feet, 27 metres from the floor, way above the remains of the Norman building that supported it. And in place of the eastern wall, they built a stained glass window the size of a tennis court.
From the outside, new and old merge seamlessly. The pointed arches of the new choir windows rising above the circular arches in the outer Norman shell. Inside, though, it's obvious that the masons were struggling a bit with these new ideas. You can see the evidence, especially from the first floor tribune gallery. The new inner walls don't quite match with the old outer ones.
Yes, from up here it all looks a bit sort of messy, doesn't it, really?
It does. You can see the workings from up here.
The new build cladding doesn't align with the old Norman stonework. And like in the crypt, they had to brace the Norman side roof.
It's like a spider's web of braces.
Yeah.
Yet again, there's evidence of the masons learning on the job. But what a job they did, as Robin Lunn reminds me.
It's a vision of heaven as far as they were concerned. What is important about this is that it's the first complete building in this new style, which we call perpendicular, with its emphasis on the vertical, on the perpendicular. And that's why this is so important in terms of English and European architectural history, which makes it the icon that it is.
Even though the name of the mason who masterminded this inspiring reconstruction has been lost in history, his influence on English architecture lives on. Because what was created here in the old Norman choir proved to be the prototype of the English Royal Chapel. Without the choir at Gloucester Cathedral, there'd be no St George's Chapel, Windsor, no King's College, Cambridge. The plans for them start here at Gloucester.
Join us at the same time tomorrow on Teachers TV for another episode from this series.
What are you having, love? What's that? That is veggie, and it's like a little dumpling thing on top.
Fancy winning a new